So today we're going to talk about kind of just real quickly, I'm not going to spend a whole ton of time, but I just want to talk about what's blooming and what's blooming in the fall season. Fall is one of my favorite seasons to get out in the yard. There's so many different projects that you can do. I love, coming out of the summer season when it's been very, very hot and humid and you just kind of get tired real quickly out working in the yard. The fall season kind of rejuvenates you and you want to get out and do things, and there's a lot of things that you can do working on your lawn, planting lots of blooming plants. It's one of the best seasons to plant plants. This is when root systems develop, so it's a great time to get out in the yard and plant some trees, shrubs, annuals, perennials, anything that you want to plant outside. It's a great time. We typically don't have to water as much. I know it's been a little bit dry recently, but usually we get a good amount of rainfall, and this is when root systems develop. You don't get a ton of top growth, which helps the root system develop, and then by the time summer hits next season, it's really pretty well established. I always say get it through one summer and you're going to be, you're on your way to success with that plant for the future. So it's a great time to do that. Think about your lawn, plant up some containers, and let's talk about blooms. So that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize. There's a lot of options of blooming plants as we get into the fall season and then even go into winter. And so a lot of times people kind of think, oh, winter's coming, there's not a lot of blooms out there, there's not much I can do right now in the fall. But there's actually a great selection. I'm going to talk about some of those things that you can plant. And as you can see in front of me, one of my number one fall favorite plants is pansies. Pansies are just great. And violas. I kind of include violas in that class, so I've got some violas here. Violas are basically kind of a smaller pansy, very, very similar in the temperatures that they can take and all the different things. But pansies are a cool weather annual. You do want to replace these and that's what annuals do. And I'm going to kind of go by each plant by kind of how we kind of department, have them in different departments here. So we'll talk about annuals, we'll talk about perennials, some house plants, some shrubs. We'll talk about all those different kind of categories as I go through these. So I'm going to start with annuals. Annuals you plant annually. So annuals are going to something that you're going to replace each season, but sometimes those seasons can be pretty long. So what I typically say is pansies are what you're going to plant in the fall, and you're going to grow those all the way through the winter. They're going to bloom even on cold days in the winter. And then in the spring, they're going to rejuvenate and kind of give you a big show. And then you're going to take them out and you're going to replace them with petunias or begonias or something like that. But there's nothing better than annual color, because typically what annuals do is they're going to bloom the entire time that you have them. And that's what they're kind of grown for, is they just keep on producing blooms. And that's why I love annuals, especially for hanging baskets, containers, in the landscape, especially in the front yard, around a mailbox, a light post, up in your front landscape to define your beds. There's so many great uses of annuals, and there's so many great ones out there. In the fall, there's not as many. There's definitely not as many. Violas and pansies are kind of really the main ones. Snapdragons do pretty well. I actually was searching for some snapdragons. I think we just run out. I'm sure we'll get more. But snapdragons are another great kind of cool season blooming plant that you can get. They tend to maybe fizzle out some in the winter and don't usually bloom too heavily in the winter. Depends on what kind of season we have or where you live. But they erupt again and they kind of explode again into this great blooming explosion in the spring again. So annuals I love because they're going to give you color for the most amount of time. So let's talk about pansies real quick, because it's definitely one of my number one favorites. And it's kind of, if you're looking for a big splash of color, it's really one of your best ways to get it in the landscape, in flower beds, in hanging baskets, and all those great things. I see Alice made a comment about white mums, and they tend to get burnt in the sun. And so, yes, mums are another great option. I've got a mum over here I'm going to talk about here in just a minute. And I'm going to put that in the perennial class, because they're actually perennials. They come back. But pansies are one of my favorite, and they come in such a wide array of colors and different sizes too. Some have faces, some are pure colors, some are multicolored. So I'm just going to show you a couple here as I kind of talk about how to grow them as well. I'll just go through some of these colors real quick. A lot of what you're going to see here at our garden center is the Matrix series. Matrix series is basically a developed hybrid that is really amazing, huge blooms. And typically what happens with pansies is when you get the bigger blooms, you don't get as many. However, with the Matrix series, you get a lot of blooms and they're big. So you're going to see a lot of Matrix series, but then there's a lot of different ones too. So you can see right here in this orange one, it's a little bit of a smaller bloom. And typically smaller blooms are going to give you more blooms. But with the Matrix series, you get this gorgeous, gorgeous, huge blooming plant. I absolutely love 6-inch pansies. This is what we call a 6-inch pansy. They come in 4-inch as well, so sometimes you'll see some 4-inch out there. And then of course you can get them in packs, you can get them in hanging baskets, bowls, all the different assortments. There's lots and lots of choices. But 6-inch are really versatile because you can use them in the landscape, you can plant up your own hanging basket, they're easy in containers. Typically what you're going to find in a 6-inch plant is 3 different plants really. So there's 3 little plugs in here. And you'll see a lot of times, and I'll probably do it next week when I do my webinar on fall containers, that I'll actually split them up or fold them out. And so they're really versatile and easy to use in different arrangements. So you could actually go in and take 3 different plants out of most of your pansies. Sometimes you'll find one that maybe has 1 or 2 in there that has been grown out a little bit more. But typically what they're doing is they're putting 3 little plugs in here, and then they're growing it out so you got a nice developed root system and you get this great looking plant. But they come in lots of colors. So orange is one of my favorites. Orange actually looks awesome in the winter season. So even going into Christmas and all the way through January and February, orange is really, really a cool color, becoming very, very popular in the landscape. Not something you see a whole lot, but it's really, really nice. Orange is great, of course, in the fall season. The pure yellow, the pure orange, this pure dark purple, I love that. That's kind of that traditional pansy, right? This is Matrix purple, so that's that Matrix series too. You can see a little bit of a yellow center in there, so it pairs really well with yellow because it kind of pulls out that eye a little bit. So it looks really, really great with that. I love the multicolored ones, and this is where I kind of talk about themes and different ways that you can use them because these always remind me of my alma mater, of James Madison. That's where I went to college. And so this purple and yellow is really pretty. It's a really kind of unusual look because you get these back 2 petals that have the purple and then the yellow face with that dark face in the middle. Really, really pretty pansy. You can work these in with lots of different combinations. It's one of my favorites because it reminds me of my school colors. And you can do this with a lot of different school colors. So I started thinking about what are all the different school colors. You've got, UVA, locally, which is the orange and really blue. But purple works pretty well. You can go straight blue. There's lots and lots of different combinations. Of course, Virginia Tech is very popular in our area. So you've got this pansy here. This one, I don't believe I can remember the name on it, but it's basically a kind of maroon and yellow color. Really pretty. And maroon and orange, you get those kind of colors in there. So you can do sports themed containers. You can do sports themed landscape. It's really, really kind of a fun way of doing it. And there's just so many colors. Ultimately, one of my favorite colors for pansies is the blue series. And there's lots and lots of different shades of blue. Sometimes you're going to be more in the purple, violet color. Sometimes you're going to be more in this kind of sky blue color. But it's one of my all-time favorites because it just it works for the fall season. It works, of course, in winter as we go through the holiday season, but into January and February. And blue is just a really cool color. And blue is not really a very natural bloom color. You don't typically see a lot of blues in nature. There are some plants that bloom with a blue flower. And I don't know if I would call that a true blue, but it's very, very close. And it looks very blue to me, and so I'm going to use it as a blue color. I mean, compared to a purple, it's definitely a blue in my eyes. So I love the blue. There's the pure white, which is just classic. White moonlit gardens are just amazing. Really, really popular theme that kind of started a few years ago where people started using white flowers and just white plants. You could pair this with Dusty Miller, some of the white blooming camellias maybe we'll talk about here in a little bit. But there's a lot of great options in the pansies, and white gardens or a white theme is really, really popular. Whether you're going to do it in a container or in the landscape, you've got great options there. Another extremely popular pansy is, of course, the yellow with blotch. So that's what this one's kind of always been famous for, is yellow with blotch. You see these a lot. These are really, really traditional pansies. Kind of, reminds you of, Alice in Wonderland with the pansies talking. And so these kind of have that really cool face to them. They're really, really awesome. Pansies are really cool because you can actually eat pansies. So a lot of people use them to decorate cakes. A lot of them are edible. And so, maybe a lot of people don't eat them that much, but you can. So they can actually be an edible plant, and they're extremely ornamental. So I absolutely love pansies. Here's another one that's got a multiple of colors. So this has burgundy, orange, and yellow, and purple. So you can get really pretty mixes too. And then the last one I wanted to show you has really become extremely popular. I grabbed it in this bowl form to try and get all the bloom colors. But I really love this pansy. I think I showed it a couple weeks ago, and I'll definitely probably use it next week in my webinar about creating fall containers. I typically always use this one. Really, really easy to use. This one's really cool because it's got these multicolored blooms. I'm going to try and hold them up so you can see it. But you can see this kind of raspberry color, and then it's got this kind of cream line in there with kind of a blotched face to it. And then you're going to get some that are a little bit lighter in nature, so a little bit lighter in color. And you'll get some yellows, you'll get some dark purples. You can see this dark purple one over here, right here by my pinky. That's kind of coming out. And they're all going to have this kind of multicolored kind of fading. They're also kind of a wavy, I don't know if you can quite see that, but it's got kind of a rippled effect to its petal. You can quite see that if I turn it to the side. I'm just going to rotate it here. But these are really awesome. It's one of my favorite ones. And really, really easy one to use because you can pair it with the blues, you can pair it with grasses, the heucheras, I'm trying to think of the other name of that plant. Now all of a sudden it escapes me. But heuchera is one of my favorite fall plants. But this is a great color that matches really well. And I love these bowls, and these come in a lot of different assortments and a lot of different colors, because you can just put this right up on your front porch, put it on a table, put it on a back patio table, on your dining table, your outside dining table. Lots and lots of uses of this. You can even just drop this into a nice ceramic pot. If it's too low, then you just get some bricks and build it up underneath or something to support it, and you can just drop this into a nice pot, and it's going to look great all winter long. So a really great way of using these bowls. But I wanted to show that really pretty color. This is called the Coastal Sunrise Mix. Sorry, I didn't even mention the name. You can see the yellows. So you get yellow, a raspberry, a blue, a purple, really pretty mix, and one of my favorites to use because it works in all the seasons, and it's kind of a different color too. You don't see a whole lot of it. So pansies are great. They're easy. Real quick kind of tips on how to grow successful pansies is plant them in October. That's why we're talking about them in October. That's why we have our big Pansy Days event is in October, because October is the best time to plant pansies. A lot of people want to plant them in September. It usually stays too warm in September. We started to get our pansies in maybe just towards the end of September, but now we are fully loaded. We've got tons of them because we really feel like October, November, even into December you can plant them. And a lot of people plant them again in the spring season as we start to kind of warm up a little bit coming out of the months of January and February. March is a great time to plant pansies. So you've got a lot of different things that you can do with pansies. The way to grow them is, of course, plant them, water. So when we water our pansies, I want you to try and get down to the root system the best that you can, rather than watering the top. I know that's not always possible. Let's see, I can actually grab this if I don't knock it over anything. I always talk about this dram watering wand. This is one of the best tools that you can use in the landscape. There's lots and lots of different things that you can use. But instead of using that spray nozzle and just going over top of the entire garden, or especially newly planted plants, this dram watering wand is great because you can actually go right down to the root system. So if you've ever come and shopped here, or if you've ever seen us watering here at the garden center, at any of our garden centers, even in our markets, everywhere, we are always using one of these. This is attached to every single hose here, and it is the best way to water. And so take it from the experts that water every single day practically. This is the way to water, and it's really, really easy. It gives you this nice 30-inch handle. It's got an on and off valve, and you can get right down to the root system. So it's a great way to water. I just want to throw that out there because whenever I talk about watering, I always talk about watering the root system and not the leaves. So it's a really, really great thing that you can do is always try and get your watering down to the bottom. You can also use soaker hoses. There's lots of different options. I just love the dram watering wand. Pansies need to be watered. I want you to water about every 2 to 3 days for the next 2 to 3 weeks. If we get a rain, then you don't need to water. Pretty simple. When you water, water pretty aggressively. I want you to water heavy, less often. So I really want you to give it a good soaking. The nice thing is with the cooler weather, it's not going to dry out as fast. So it typically in the spring or as we get into the summer season, I'm talking maybe as much as 3 to 5 minutes on each plant. But in the fall, you can probably get away with 1 to 2 minutes. So I want you to kind of, really sit there and soak it. Just spraying over the top, giving it a little bit of drink of water is only going to get it through maybe a couple hours to maybe a day. But if you can do about a good soaking for a minute or two, then it's going to last for about 2 to 3 days. And that's what I want you to do is water every third day for the next 2 to 3 weeks. Pretty simple. Now, pansies are heavy feeders. They really need some plant food. And so I didn't grab my plant food, but our green leaf plant food is a great option for these. And in fact, I put a little bit down in the hole. It's called the dibble method. You just put it down into the bottom of the hole, you put it, and you put the root system right on top. Now, a lot of people get worried about burning the root system, but pansies are heavy feeders. They're going to uptake that nitrogen pretty quickly. That's what they love. A little bit of nitrogen, a little bit of phosphorus, a little bit of potassium, and that's going to get them going and get them going real fast. You can use the biotone starter from Espoma as a great option. You'll get big, huge plants very quickly, but they do need to be fed with a granular fertilizer, with a granular plant food. You're going to fertilize these about every 1 to 2 months. So I usually say 6 to 8 weeks. So every 6 to 8 weeks, give them a little bit of food because they want it, and they want to particularly feed all the way through the winter season. Now, if the ground is frozen, I wouldn't go out there and feed them. They're probably going into a little bit of a dormant state, but otherwise, you need to keep up that regimen. Every 6 to 8 weeks, give them a little bit of granulated food. If you're using a liquid food, probably somewhere around every 3 to 4 weeks. A little bit more of an aggressive plant food situation there. Deadheading. Deadheading is very important. So when we go through and we look at our pansies, you're going to see this is a great example right here. This guy right here might look like a bud, but it's not. And so when you feel like your pansy is done blooming, you'll see them really here. This is when I like to try and pick them. You don't have to do it right away. You can do it over time, so you can let them go for a couple weeks, and then you can go through and do some deadheading. But deadheading does help. Pansies, all plants, bloom for a reason, to produce a seed. Now, most pansies have been hybridized to produce a sterile seed or a seed that actually isn't going to come to a complete formation, which means it'll say, well, that one didn't work, so I'm going to produce another bloom and try and seed. And so it's kind of a way that we've kind of tricked the plants into keep blooming for us. And that way you don't have seeds all over your yard and you got pansies popping up everywhere. But this is a great way of telling when it's done. You're going to see this bloom is kind of faded. So all you got to do is just go in with your hands and just pick it out. Usually what I'll do is I'll let them kind of go, and when I see that they're almost all kind of stopped blooming for maybe a day or two, then I'll go in and just take everything out. But here's a great example. See if I can show this to you. That's a seed. So it's trying to produce a seed. This will eventually not produce anything. It'll eventually kind of die back, and then it'll produce more blooms over the top of it. But eventually, you'll start to get more of these built up, and the plant really thinks that it's going to succeed, and then all of a sudden, it's going to stop blooming. So you do want to go through and do a little bit of deadheading every once in a while. Then other than that, it's pretty simple. I do recommend mulching our pansies. It makes it look really nice in the landscape to mulch them out. And other than that, water, a little bit of plant food, a little bit of deadheading here and there, and you're going to have some great, gorgeous pansies, and then they're going to go crazy in the spring, and you're going to feel really bad about ripping them up, but it'll be time to change your color pattern or whatever you want to do and get into the begonia and petunia season. So I know that was a lot of information on pansies, but pansies are one of my favorites, and they're one of the all-time best blooming plants for our area here in the Hampton Roads area, as well as really all the way up to probably zone, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, and then all the way down to about zone 8 or 9. And we're right around that 7, 8 zone in our neck of the woods. Let's see, I saw a bunch of questions popping up, so I'll go back and check those real quick before I move on to the next plant. Got a bunch of questions. Okay, so Alice started off with saying, I love white mums, but they tend to burn in sun, but other colors don't. Also, I think you can plant in the ground. Yes, Alice, I'm going to talk about mums here in a minute. I'll go over a little bit more of that in detail. Alice, if you want a whole webinar on mums. I did a whole webinar on them. So you can go back and check that out. Perennials, they're going to come back every year. So, but I'll get into that here in a little bit. Joanna said, well, let's see. I think Ebony said, I can't believe it's already a year since my first webinar with you. I appreciate you and your team. Thank you, Ebony. Very nice. We're going to continue to do them. Joanna, I've never been successful with the larger pansies. The Johnny Jump Ups are my favorite. And that is a very good statement, Joanna. A lot of people find that the smaller pansies are a little bit easier. I would say probably more low maintenance. Typically with your Matrix series, your larger pansy blooms, like this purple, look how big that bloom is compared to this one. So your violas are typically going to be a little bit easier because you probably don't have to deadhead them as much. They don't need as much plant food. Smaller blooms means that the plant isn't spending as much energy on it. With the bigger blooms, they are. So with your Matrix series, you're going to get this huge color explosion. With your smaller violas, you're not. And there's a lot of different pansies. I mean, this is another pansy here. I don't have a specific name or variety on it, but it is a smaller bloom. And typically when you see smaller blooms, it's probably a cross between a viola and a pansy. I know we used to do a nature series way back. Man, it's probably been 10 years now since we've done the nature series, but nature series was a cross between a viola and a pansy. So you got smaller blooms, but they weren't quite as small as a viola, and so they were a little bit bigger, but you got the reliability of a lot of blooms. So, you know, there's a lot of different sizes out there. Look at the size of bloom and think about, if you want a little bit more low maintenance, Joanna, then the violas are probably the right ticket for you, or a smaller bloom might be a little bit better. So if you're looking for a specific color, violas aren't grown as much now as pansies, but if you're looking for something that's maybe a little bit more low maintenance, then I would go with the smaller blooms for sure. Patrick, thank you. They are beautiful. And Charlene said, monkey face plants. Yep, a lot of people used to call them monkey face plants. What type of temperatures can it handle? Patrick said, so Patrick was asking what type of temperatures can it handle? So they really can take temperatures almost down into the teens. You're going to see a lot of times when it gets really, really cold that they're going to maybe not bloom as much, but even with a mountain of snow over the top of them, they're going to come out as the snow melts and they're going to be perfectly fine. So really you're not going to have any major issues with temperature here in this area, Patrick. And I believe you live up in the Williamsburg area because you're kind of a great watcher and you kind of tune in all the time. So Patrick, in Williamsburg, you're not going to have an issue with the temperatures. If you get up into, like I said, that zone 4 or 5, you might have a little bit more trouble getting it through the winter season. So you know, watch out there in those zones 4 and 5. But here in zones 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you're going to be perfectly fine. Do deer? Oh wait, sorry, I missed one. I have a bunch of cucumber beetles hanging around the last of my sunflowers in my garden. Do I need to worry about that they'll target the pansies I'm planting this weekend? I've noticed thus far they're staying away from my mums. Yeah, I don't think you'll have any issues with the cucumber beetles on your pansies. If you start to see them kind of creeping that way, come in and check us out. We can maybe get you something that's safe to spray, not going to hurt your pansies, be organic and all of those great things. And we can help you out if you experience a problem, but typically those cucumber beetles are going to move on to something else. They're not super attracted to pansies. Definitely not mums. Mums are chrysanthemums and typically don't have a whole lot of insect issues, surprisingly, because chrysanthemums are actually used to make another type of insecticide, which is kind of, you know, a funny kind of way. One of the favorite products that I always talk about is Triple Action. It's got pyrethrin that comes from chrysanthemum oil. So chrysanthemums definitely aren't going to have a problem. Pansies are a little bit more susceptible to some insects, but typically by the time we start to really cool down, those cucumber beetles are going to move on. Do deer like pansies? Yes. So unfortunately, deer do like pansies. I didn't bring this product in, Eileen, but a great solution to that is we have a product called Repellix. It's a systemic repellent. So it was amazing kind of new invention. It's really very safe. It's capsaicin. Now you won't be able to eat your pansies, but if you're probably not eating your pansies and you're just using them for ornamental reasons, you can use this Repellix product. It's a granular product. You just put it right down around the plant. It's capsaicin. It's completely safe and animal safe. but it makes your pansies taste like hot peppers, which means that the deer and the rabbits won't enjoy them. It actually protects the root system as well from voles. So if you're interested in that, Eileen, we've got a great solution for you. You can spray, of course, the top with a deer repellent to keep them off, but that's going to wash off. The Repellex stays in it for an entire year. So you'll be covered there. It's a great thing for anybody that's got deer issues. Then you need to get a bottle of the Repellex Systemic Repellent. So Patrick said, I'm no expert, however I do know they love cool weather. After snow, they will still come back. Yep, so great answer there. So Charlene, thank you for answering. They will last until it gets hot. They don't like heat. Great value for the money. They last a long time. Very, very true. I mean, if you want color and you want it all the way through the fall season, into, through the winter, into the spring, it's one of the best. And then I think, thank you, appreciate, they're beautiful. Perfect for me. Yep. So yep, if you work, they're perfect for you. They're one of the easiest ones to do, and I love the fall season because we get the cooler weather. The watering requirements aren't as high. Really, all you have to do is feed them, water them a little bit, and then every once in a while go through and pick some of those deadheads out, and you're going to have a great success with your pansies. And then Jennifer asked again about the deer tolerance. I definitely recommend using that Repellex Systemic Repellent. It's a great option. Can I use the green leaf fertilizer and some biotone when I plant pansies, or should I pick one or the other? Great question, Ann. Really, really good question. I would say start with biotone. And the reason is biotone's got mycorrhizae and beneficial bacteria, and those actually need to get right on the root system very quickly. So when that product, when that plant food that you use gets right onto the root system, gets watered in, then those mycorrhizae and beneficial bacteria get stimulated, and then they activate right onto the root system, and then they can stay with that plant for the entirety of its life. Now, if you're planting a tree and shrub, very, very important, or a perennial that's going to be year after year after year. Pansies, not as important, but you will get some of the prettiest pansies if you use biotone. Don't use your green leaf plant food for another 2 or 3 weeks after that, because biotone starter is a starter fertilizer. So it's actually got plant food in there, so you're going to be perfectly fine using that. Let it work its magic for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then it's safe to put your green leaf plant food on there, whether you're using the organic or the traditional. Green leaf really was designed almost specifically for pansies, and then we developed it into a all-purpose plant food that you can use pretty much on anything. But it is amazing what it does for pansies. You'll never see them greener or bloom more. Let's see. Viola is their name. The flower is about the size of the dime or a nickel. They do great in pots. So yeah. Oh, sorry, what is Johnny Jump Up? I missed that question. I did see it, but I forgot to read it. So what is a Johnny Jump Up? Is a viola. So yep, Joanna's exactly right. Johnny Jump Ups are violas. All right, great. Well, pansies are one of the main things I want to talk about. We spent a lot of time on that. So I'm going to kind of somewhat breeze through the rest of this because I don't want to spend too much time. If I did that, I've got a lot of plants here, surprisingly. Fall is a great season to plant. So let's stay in that annuals category and talk about just a couple other things that we can do. There's Plectranthus is a really pretty blooming plant. It's called monolavender Plectranthus. I believe that's what it's still called. Yep, monolavender. What I love about this is that really dark, almost black to purple green color that it's got on its leaf. Really, really dark. I mean, you can see the difference in a pansy leaf compared to this Plectranthus. And then you get loads of these spiky blooms with all these really dark purple blooms. Now, when we get really cold, it probably won't go in the first frost, but about the second or third frost, it's usually pretty much done. But it's a great blooming plant until that time comes. And our frost date really isn't until frost isn't going to hurt pansies or snapdragons, but your Plectranthus, some of your other things that you might still have blooming right now, it'll typically take care of that. In our neck of the woods here in the Hampton Roads area, typically that's anywhere from November 10th to November 20th. So somewhere in that kind of time range of that early November. We might not have one until after Thanksgiving, but typically right around that mid part of November is when we're going to get our first frost. But there's lots of great choices of things that you can still plant and get some enjoyment out of before that happens. A lot of people plant them in containers and then bring them into the garage if they think there might be a frost that night. You can cover them with a sheet. We've got frost cloth that you can buy here, so you can get a little blanket to put over the top of it that protects it and gets it through those cold nights that we might have every once in a while. By the time we get into December, typically you might be somewhat done with it, trying to cover it up, or you can take it in your garage, bring it back out when you see a nice warm week. But Plectranthus is a great option, just for some different color. Dianthus, the annual Dianthus, is still growing really, really strong. So you'll see a little bit of this still in the garden center. but annual Dianthus is a great one. A lot of people plant these in the month of September, maybe even August, because you're going to get a good amount of bloom, and they just keep on going. Really, really easy. I grabbed this one because it's got this kind of big deadhead down here. I want to show you real quick. All you got to do is just when you see this, you've got this one little bloom coming out of it, but otherwise it's all a spent bloom. And I just want to show you the size of this thing real quick. Nope. Phone's going off. So here I've got this. You can see how many blooms there were on this. I mean, it's just a huge, there must be 50 to 60 buds in there, just packed in there. And they're all done. And then once you're done with that, you just pick it, and then this will keep on blooming. So Dianthus is another great option. All right, let's stay in that annuals category. Let me show you the next options that are still out there. As I mentioned, Snapdragons is a great one. I just didn't have them right now, but we will get more in. Snapdragons is a great option. Celosia is another great option. And actually, Coleus is not a bad one either. Coleus is going to go pretty quickly when we have a frost. Celosia is a little bit more cool tolerant, tends to bloom a little bit heavier as we go through these cooler nights. But this one is really pretty. This one's called Intense. So Celosia Intense. I don't know if you can see that with my glare. There we go, Intense. Really, really cool variety of Celosia with these really kind of fuzzy, they're actually a little bit more on the prickly side when you touch them, but really cool, pretty blooms. These go great with pansies. I mean, you can pair these with some Johnny Jump Up, some violas, and you'll be ready to roll. But Celosia is going to go when we get a frost, but this is still a really, really good one that you can grow, and a lot of people are actually growing these indoors as indoor plants, which is another category I'm going to talk about. And then I grabbed one more Celosia just because I've been seeing this one all fall, and I am just in love with this guy. Really, really cool Celosia. Looks like a coral reef. It's kind of got this corally kind of pinkish color to it. Really, really different. A lot of people call them coxcomb, but Celosia, really, really different one here. And these have such heavy heads now because they just continue to bloom that they're starting to kind of hang down a little bit. So that might be featured in my webinar next week about planting up a fall container, because I don't care if this lasted just a week. It is absolutely stunning. You got to see this one in person. It's awesome. Hey, Deborah. All right. So, last but not least for annuals is ornamental peppers. Ornamental peppers are a great option, and while this is not a true bloom, it's what results from a bloom, and so I actually call it a really great annual color for this kind of fall, autumn season. It's a great option because you're going to get these orange and yellows. I don't know if you can quite see that, but really pretty ornamental peppers. I love these containers. They can really kind of trail over the side. They've got this really top heaviness because of all the peppers that are on here. Now, you don't want to eat these peppers. These are extremely hot and not like the tasty hot, kind of like the gross hot. So typically you're not going to eat these. They're just grown for ornamental purposes. Use this one as great in containers. You can actually bring them inside for a couple days if you're having, a Thanksgiving dinner and you're kind of worried about the cooler nights that we're having at that point. It's a great option to bring it inside, grow it in a kind of a sunny window for a couple days. All you got to do every once in a while is your peppers are going to dry up a little bit and you just pick them out and you're good to go. So really, really nice one. And then I grabbed this one as well, just to show you a couple other varieties because there's a lot of them. You can see these have more of the lime green and orange in them, and they're a little bit longer peppers. And then you've even got purple peppers. So you can see this purple to kind of almost orange mixture on these little tiny ball peppers over here on the side that are really trailing. So you can get this nice little combination. It's got two different types of peppers in it, and you can put this on your porch or patio and have some great color all the way until about Thanksgiving. It's a really great option. So ornamental peppers are another good one. And then I wanted to show one more. It's kind of a runner-up because it doesn't really bloom, but the ornamental cabbages and kales. There's a great selection of these, and these I will definitely be using in a container for sure this fall and winter season because they just keep on going. Look at that paired with that blue pansy. You cannot beat it. The colors in here are just amazing. What happens to these, while it's not a bloom, I did want to bring this up just because of the color, it's awesome in the landscape. Really, really great in containers, but this color is just starting to come on. This gets super, super intense as we get colder. So actually, the cooler that we get, the better this color is. And these will make it all the way through the winter season, especially in our area. So you don't have to worry about the colder nights, even the winter season on these. And there's ornamental ones, there's Kales, there's Cabbages, there's some that are upright, there's some that stay more flat and bushy like this. But really, really cool. Love to put these in containers and position them just like this. So I'll actually use this in a pot, and then I'll kind of turn the root ball and stick it in so that it really kind of shows off this way. These will bloom in the spring with a kind of a yellow crazy flower. And typically what I would say is when they bloom in the spring, it's kind of done. It's kind of their time to go. So, but really, really great option is the ornamental cabbages and kales. All right, so that kind of does it for our annuals department. Real quickly, I'm going to move over to perennials. I'm going to show you a few perennials, a few trees and shrubs, and then, or not some trees. I don't really have any fall blooming trees, although I guess I could have. I didn't bring them in. You know, you think of magnolias. Magnolias are still blooming right now. But the perennials, there's still some great options in perennials. Of course, the number one option are mums. So here is this absolutely stunning mum that I grabbed. And this is why I wanted to show this. Look at the amount of color on this garden mum. Absolutely stunning. It's actually kind of, almost looks like it's showing up a little bit more on the red side. Here it's purplish, so it's got this really pretty purple hue. These come in whites, pinks, yellows, purples, maroons. There's a huge array of color. And when they bloom like this, you cannot get a better show than that. I mean, there must be, I don't know, 300, 400 blooms on this plant. It's just absolutely stunning. It's a great option. And as we were talking about earlier, and I said I would mention, these are perennials. You can actually plant these. A lot of people throw them away, and that's fine if you want to throw them away if you're done with them after they fizzle up, which will typically be around that mid-November, end of November time frame. So, you know, just right around that Thanksgiving, the holiday time, these are going to kind of start to go. Outside, especially if you keep them outside. And you can grow these somewhat inside. I'm going to show you another option for that here in a second. Just over my shoulder, I got another mum that I'll show you. But these garden mums, is what we call them, garden mums, are perennial. You can plant them outside. So when they're kind of done, maybe on your front porch, go plant them somewhere in the backyard. They're super, super reliable. They're very easy. If you want all the care instructions, because there's a little bit of work that needs to be done to get a really excellent garden mum, you don't have to do it, but there's some things that you can do. Check out my past webinar on garden mums, where I talk specifically all about mums and how to grow them. There's a little bit of pruning, a little bit of feeding that needs to be done, a little bit of a schedule there that you can stay on to get a really pretty garden mum. But mums are absolutely stunning on the front porch, and if you want to chunk them afterwards, that's fine. And what I will tell you, the little tip here, is in the winter, I'll be doing some porch pots where I'm going to take fresh greens and pack them into a pot. And this is a great option, is if you're going to throw your mum away, just take the top and cut it off when it kind of dries up and goes away. When that first frost happens, you'll see it happen. Take and cut the top off, save your root ball. You can plant it for one, but two, then we can use that root ball to actually put stuffed greens in. So save that kind of as a tip for later when we do a webinar about using stuffed greens in containers. One of my favorite winter projects to do as we get closer to the holiday season. So let's see, you're doing a great job. The mum is gorgeous. Thank you, Priscilla. Appreciate that. All right, so the next perennial that I want to talk about is coneflowers. Coneflowers are actually really performing great into the fall season. I mean, I think a lot of us think the fall starts in September, which it does, and then goes all the way through November. And really, coneflowers are going to continue to bloom while we have some warmer days, pretty much typically through October. Before they start to go into their dormant period. What I also love about coneflowers is the seed head that gets produced. So when these start to fall off, when the petals start to fall off, you get this kind of prickly, kind of round, almost blackish colored seed head that you can use in decorating. So growing perennial coneflowers is a great option. This is an actual true orange. Really, really pretty. Let's see if it's got a variety on it. It is called Sombrero, Adobe Orange. Look at that. Absolutely stunning. I grabbed another one. We've got a great selection of some reds, some yellows. This is absolutely just amazing, that bloom on this guy. It only had one on it, but I couldn't beat it. It was so big, it was absolutely gorgeous. These do great in the landscape. They're very drought tolerant. They're very easy to grow. A little bit of deadheading here and there. through the growing season is great, a little bit of plant food, but other than that, coneflowers are super easy to take care of. They're deer resistant, nothing really messes with them. They don't typically have any insect issues. Maybe a little bit of powdery mildew as we come into this fall season. You might see that's easy to treat for. It's better be preventative than curative, as I always say. But coneflowers are absolutely stunning in the fall season, and you can't beat that color. And cutting them off and using them in arrangements in the house is great, or letting it go to seed and then using that seed head is a great option. Plus, the birds love to get into them, into those seeds as we go into the fall season. So another great thing that you can do for the birds is grow some coneflowers. Another one is Black-Eyed Susan. Black-Eyed Susan continues to grow all the way into the fall season as well. Rudbeckia. So if you're looking for some fall color, Rudbeckia is one of my favorite ones. Really, really easy to grow. Very drought tolerant as well. Super easy. Don't have a lot of issues. Again, maybe a little bit of powdery mildew as we enter the fall season, as we start to get those overcast days and those cooler nights. But Rudbeckia with this yellow color is stunning in the fall, and they're called Black-Eyed Susan because of that black eye right there, because of that black center. And they also produce a little bit of a seed head that's great in some fall decorating. And then I grabbed another one that we just got in. This is stunning. So Rudbeckia, Black-Eyed Susan. This one is called Denver Daisy, but that is also a Rudbeckia. Look at that bloom. Absolutely stunning. So you can get lots of different varieties in these as well. Super easy to grow, huge blooms, and there's nothing more fall than yellow and maroon and orange. And so I just love that color combination, and that is a gorgeous, gorgeous bloom. Really great perennial, tried and true. Does very, very well each year. I did grab this one because I was trying to think of something in the shade that kind of blooms in the fall. And there's Plumbago. Some of the Adagio's will pop out some color, but Heuchera, or let's see if I can think of the other name. It's not going to tell me. Oh, coral bells. I knew I could remember it. So I forgot it earlier, but coral bells is what a lot of people call these. Heuchera is more of the technical term, the garden term. But Heucheras will actually bloom with this kind of fun, whimsical bloom on top. Typically, you're going to see that more in the spring, but you'll get some in the fall as well. So these fall blooms are really fun and unusual. A lot of people actually grow Heucheras or coral bells just for the foliage and don't like the blooms and will take them off, which you can do. But I love to use these in containers. They're a shade-loving perennial. They're pretty much evergreen. They come in lots of different colors: maroons, lime greens, pinks. Really, really kind of waxy leaves. Some have the fuzzy leaves. Got the undercolor, the color of the undertone of their leaves. New leaves come out with this color, but they're just a great kind of fall plant. I love to use them all the time in containers in the landscape, and these blooms can be very fun and whimsical. And then, of course, you can't have fall without an ornamental grass. And so you might be thinking, well, that's just a grass. But these are the blooms on an ornamental grass. And there's a lot of different bloom styles on ornamental grasses. This one is Adagio, I believe. Let me check. Yep, Miscanthus Adagio. And there's a lot of different ones out there, like the pink muhly grass you probably see a lot. All of those plumes on the top, you think of Pampas grass. Pampas grass has a huge white plume on the top. That's its flower. So these are all the flowers here of this Miscanthus Adagio. Really, really cool. And this happens in the fall with almost all your ornamental grasses. You think of sea oats, all the Miscanthus, all the little bunnies. So there's lots and lots of different types of grasses out there. There's a ton of different choices. There's the Shenandoah, I believe, has a little bit of red tinge to the color. The muhly grass is really, really popular, the Muhlenbergia. But this is a really, really popular one. Miscanthus Adagio, Pampas grass. We've got all of those options for you. I also grabbed this big one. Let's see if I can get this down here real quick, because this is really the start of its bloom. So you see how they're kind of thin. They're not really doing a whole lot, but I love the look of them and just moving in the wind. Awesome, awesome. But as these actually bloom out, you'll see what they can kind of become. Let me see if I can grab this big one here. It's a big, huge grass. This is a monster. But let's see if I can get this down here. Ah, there we go. So now you can see the difference in what that bloom is going to start doing. It gets a little bit fuzzier, and it's really, really fun. These look great along shorelines, in the coastal areas. So you can see how it starts, and then you can see what it becomes. This really awesome kind of straw color. Looks like wheat growing. It's super, super soft. Lots and lots of fun. And a lot of people actually use these in floral arrangements. So if you do a lot of floral arrangements, this is a great option because you can go in and cut these flower heads out and use them in different arrangements. but I love ornamental grasses, and they're great perennials. They come back year after year. In fact, I will let mine typically go brown in the winter season, and then I won't cut them back until really almost mid-March. It's typically what you don't want to do is have the new grass shoots coming out when you cut it back. But other than that, I leave it brown. If we get a snow, which is pretty rare in the Hampton Roads area, but if we get a snow, that brown tuft of grass coming out looks absolutely amazing. Why is mine slumped over? I think talking about the sunflower maybe. Why is mine slumped over? Is it dead? The one that looks like a sunflower. So yeah, the Rudbeckia. It's probably not dead. If it's a perennial, if it was bought, Deborah, as a perennial plant, it shouldn't be dead. It might just be spent. And typically perennials, again, what's the life cycle of a plant? What's the objective of a plant to bloom is to seed, is to reproduce. And so that takes a lot of energy and a lot of time. And so what they're doing is probably just being a little spent after a long season. Deborah, next year I would probably recommend doing a little bit of plant food. You can do some now in the fall. What we don't want to do is do it too late because you might force it to grow and then all of a sudden we get a frost. But try a little light plant food now, and then next year if it's a perennial, if it's a Rudbeckia, it should be a perennial, it should come back for you. And then it should do a little bit better with having a little bit more of a consistent feed. Typically with perennials, I'm feeding every 6 to 8 weeks through the growing season with a granular plant food. Anything that's going to bloom and designed to bloom heavy, you got to keep feeding it. It's using a lot of energy to do that. So with our green leaf granulated plant food, I would do every 6 to 8 weeks with that, whether it's the organic or the traditional. And then cut it off as you get into the fall season. And you're going to see it continue to perform pretty well for you. So try that. I think that's the best option for you. You can try stakes if you just feel like maybe the heads of those flowers got too big. That could be an option too. You can grow it in a cage next year. There's lots and lots of great options, Deborah. So maybe take a picture, bring it in, let us, some of the experts here look at it, and we can help you figure out the best solution for it next year. For this year, I'd probably say let it just go into dormancy naturally. All right, so then I want to go to shrubs. So let me just make sure I got all my perennials here. Yep, we're talking about the Rudbeckia, the coneflowers, the grasses, the heucheras, or the coral bells. So great options there. And of course, the garden mums. Really, really great option. For shrubs, there's not a whole lot that blooms in the fall for the shrubs. There's some, hydrangeas are actually still going. We're actually going to get in a little bit of a crop of hydrangeas. So if you're in the hydrangea market and you want to get some hydrangeas, you can come in and check those out here pretty soon. But this is the Encore Azaleas. So azaleas are one of the most probably used plants in this area, in the Hampton Roads area, because they're shade loving. We have lots of big trees. They really love a little bit of shade. The Encore series can actually take a little bit more sun than a traditional azalea can. But what I love about Encores is they bloom in the fall. And so they bloom spring, sporadically in the summer, and in the fall. So if you've ever seen an azalea in the spring that's completely covered in blooms, probably not an Encore. Encore azaleas aren't going to be quite as heavily loaded with blooms. But if I'm going to get some blooms in the spring, a little bit here in the summer, and then another big bloom in the fall, and usually with Encores, once they're acclimated, once they've grown for a year or two in our area, then you're typically going to get the best bloom in the fall season. And they come in a wide array of colors: whites, pinks, purples. There's some marble colors. The twist is one of the popular ones with the purple and white stripe. Lots and lots of different shades of pink, even the fuchsia colors. So really, really pretty. I found this white one out there that's gorgeous. Even the reds, there's a really pretty one called Embers or Bonfire. But the Encore series are a great option for a fall blooming shrub. And these are evergreen. And they're pretty, resistant to a lot of different things. You might get a little bit of lace bug damage here and there, easy to treat for. Deer will nibble on these while they're young, but as they get older, they typically don't have much of a problem with them. They usually don't mess with them too much. But deer are a little bit of have a little bit of an attractance to these. But Encore azaleas, absolutely one of the best. Lots of different sizes too. That's what I love about these. A lot of people want shrubs to stay in that 2 to 3 foot size, and a lot of these fit that mold. Some that can get to 4 to 5 feet. So you got a great option. You can shear them, you can round them off, you can box them up if you want to, but you can let them just be natural as well. Awesome under pine trees, oak trees, maples. They love the acidic soil in this area. One of the easiest, best shrubs that you can do out there. Give them a little bit of shade. I think they're going to be the happiest, but you get blooms in the spring, summer, and fall. You can't beat that. So the Encore series, you're going to see them all in these purple Encore pots. Really, really great option. And then another shrub that I thought of course, is our fall blooming camellias. Now there's a lot of different options here in the fall blooming camellias. I believe this is the Bonanza, and there's a Shishigashira. So fall blooming camellias, let's talk about this real quick, just to get this out of the way, just a short synopsis on this. Camellias are broken up into two different types of camellias. There's Camellia japonica and Camellia sasanqua. Camellia sasanqua is your fall blooming camellias, and we can just call them that. We don't have to remember sasanqua. Camellia japonica is your spring blooming camellias. And so you can basically say that those two ways, spring blooming camellias and fall blooming camellias. Fall blooming camellias usually have a smaller leaf, smaller bloom, but get tons of blooms. Your spring blooming camellias, Camellia japonicas, are going to bloom with bigger blooms, usually have bigger leaves, don't have quite as many blooms, but they have a huge array of colors and tons of different types of blooms and lots of different colors. But they do require a little bit of shade. I really think spring blooming camellias are best grown in a little bit of shade. They're kind of like azaleas. They like to be underneath pine trees, oak trees, maples, things where they can get a little bit of reprieve from that hot afternoon sun. But fall blooming camellias can grow in any condition. Really, seriously, they can grow in shade, deep shade, all the way to full sun. They're extremely versatile plants, and they bloom very reliably every fall season. With all camellias, my favorite thing to tell people, don't prune them after the 4th of July. So when we have Independence Day, when we have our 4th of July, don't prune them after that date. They're starting to set buds, whether they're spring blooming or fall blooming. Best information I can give you there. You do want to give them a little bit of plant food when you plant them. The Biotone starter would be a great option. It'll stay with it the entire life of its plant, but they're very, very easy. Now, fall blooming camellias, really I break them up into two different little kind of categories, which is one that's going to be a little bit of a lower grower. Now they get about 3 to 4, maybe 5 feet tall at the max, but really can be kept about 3 feet tall. They do get a little bit wider, so they're going to get as wide as maybe 5 to 6 feet wide, so really can cover some space, which is great. I'm always looking for that in the landscape, something that's going to cover some space, but not cover my windows, or I don't want a huge hedge, but I really want to cover some territory. I want to cover some ground. That's why I love these. These get about 3 feet high to 4 feet high to about 5 to 6 feet wide, so really can cover some space. I've seen some old specimens. I'm talking old. There's one here. If you ever ask anybody here at the Independence location to show you that fall blooming camellia out front, it is absolutely a monster, but I don't know when it was planted, but let's say it's got to be at least 40 years old. Never really been pruned hard, really been kept or just let to go, and it's probably 8 to 10 feet tall. It's a massive width on it. It's got to be 15 feet wide. Don't let it scare you. They can be maintained and be grown much smaller. And Bonanza is a great option. Bonanza is more of a red bloom, and then the Shishigashira is more of a pink bloom. And there's a couple different varieties mixed in there. Hot Shot, there's a couple different ones. But those are kind of what I call my low squatty growers. Then there's other ones called your upright growers, or what I like to say, your upright columnar habits. And I didn't grab one because they're not quite blooming yet, but they really bloom in the fall into the winter. So the two favorites are Autumn Rocket, which is a pure white bloom, very carnation-like bloom like this, very full double bloom. And then Yuletide. Yuletide, of course, is synonymous with Christmas. And Yuletide is going to be a red bloom with a yellow center. Very, very Christmas-looking flower. Absolutely gorgeous. Really blooms all the way into Christmas. Autumn Rocket typically fizzles before Christmas, but can sometimes. Depends on Mother Nature. But they both grow in a columnar habit, and what I love to use those for is framing. You can use them to frame your house. You can use them for a skinny hedgerow. You can use them in containers. They're great in containers. They typically get somewhere between 6 to 8 feet tall. I've seen them bigger. 6 to 8 feet tall by about 2 to 3 feet wide. The Autumn Rocket typically stays a little bit skinnier, the white blooming Autumn Rocket. The red blooming Yuletide typically gets a little bit wider, maybe 3 to 4 feet. But right in that columnar height, so think 6 to 8 to maybe 10 feet tall by about 3 to 4 feet wide. So that kind of almost pencil habit. But really, really great fall blooming plants. Very, very versatile, very easy to grow. Don't have a lot of issues. They are pretty deer resistant. If they're young plants, protect them. As the plant gets older, they typically don't mess with them. But awesome, awesome plant, the fall blooming camellia, Sasanqua camellias. All right, so that really kind of does it for my shrub portion. Although I think some people might classify ornamental grasses as shrubs. For trees, there's not a whole lot of fall blooming options, typically magnolias. And let's see if we got any questions here. Deborah said, mine are only 3 years old and are huge. When do you cut it back? The Encore Azaleas. So that is the trickiest part. Great question, Deborah. When do you cut back your Encore Azaleas? You can really, the best time to do it is in the spring, right after the first bloom. You might lose a little bit of your summer bloom, but typically you're not. But you don't want to do it after the fall season. You can stimulate growth when you prune, and then all of a sudden we get a really cold snap, and then you burn off all that new foliage. So what I always recommend is after you enjoy that first big bloom set that it has in the spring, once those blooms start to fade, go in and shear it and shape it, give it a little bit of plant food to stimulate growth, and you should be back in business in a couple weeks, and you should see blooms starting to kind of come out sporadically in the summer again. Might be a little bit later than normal just because of that prune. Now, in the fall, it should be perfectly fine and back to normal. So typically I try and just get one prune in if I can per year, give it a little bit of shaping. Encore Azaleas is going to be a little bit more on the natural side, but if you're really trying to go for a box cut, then you can do that pretty much all summer. Let's say you're really trying to shape them, keep them really into a form, then you would want to cut that off around the 4th of July, and then let it go, and you should still get your fall blooms. But if you were just trying to eliminate just a little bit of this kind of wild habit, then just do that right after its first bloom in the spring. Great question, Deborah. Very, very good. Darlene said, is it too late to cut back my hydrangea? It has gotten way too big for where it is. Darlene, really loaded question there. I did a whole webinar on hydrangeas. Really depends on the variety, so I'll try and do this real quick. With hydrangeas, if they bloom kind of consistently all summer long, then you probably have a repeat bloomer or one that blooms on new wood. If you kind of had one big bloom and then it's never really done much after that, maybe you had one or two here and there, but you really just had one big bloom, then it might be one that blooms on old wood. Also, how old is it? Most of your new hydrangeas, pretty much anything that's been planted in the last 5 to 6 years, typically, is going to be one that's a repeat bloomer, blooms on new wood and old wood. Whereas maybe you inherited it when you purchased your house or wherever you live, then if you don't know how old it is, it's probably an older variety, and then I would be worried about it. So yes, you can cut the blooms off. You can always do that. But if you want to cut it back to make it a little bit smaller, then we got to kind of be specific of what variety it is, or if it's a continuous blooming variety or if it's an old-fashioned variety. When did you say to cut back the spring blooming camellia? The spring blooming camellia, you do it after its first bloom. All camellias get done before July 4th. All of them. Sasanqua or Japonica. But back to Darlene on your question on hydrangeas. To cut them back really depends on the variety. So if it's one of the white blooming varieties, like, now the name is escaping me, Little Lime or Limelight hydrangea. If it's got more of that kind of panicle shaped, that pointed kind of shaped white bloom, and she said, my hydrangea is an old-fashioned hydrangea. Okay, so Darlene, this year, just cut those dead blooms off if you want to, but don't cut it back hard. Next year, what I want you to do, and if you do cut it back, your hydrangea is going to live. You're going to be perfectly fine. You're just not going to get any blooms next year. So if it's an old-fashioned hydrangea, it blooms on this year's growth. And what that means is you have to prune it at a point so that it can regrow some stems, and then that's what it's going to bloom on next year. If you cut it back now, you're probably not going to get a lot of regrowth out of it, which means that you aren't going to get any blooms next year. So a lot of people come in and say, my hydrangea is absolutely stunning. I've never seen it as green. It looks completely gorgeous, but it's not blooming. It's usually because you pruned it too late last year. So I would say just prune off the dead blooms if you want to. That's perfectly fine. You can let them naturally fall if you want to, but do a little bit of light tipping. That's fine, but leave a majority of that wood on there. And then next year, after it blooms, Darlene, in the spring to summer time frame, after you get that first big bloom set, enjoy the blooms for a little while. But at some point, typically around the early August time frame, I like to give it a prune. And what that does is allow the plant to have enough growing season left, because it gives it about 6 to 8 weeks more to grow, really all the way through August into September. Give it a little bit of plant food after you prune it, and you can prune it hard, Darlene. If it's been there a long time, you can prune it back to about probably 2 to 3 feet if you want to, maybe even shorter. And then that'll allow it to regrow, and then the next year you'll get your blooms. So I know that was a long answer, but that is a tricky question. Hydrangeas are always the trickiest one. But Deborah, to answer your question, all camellias prune before the 4th of July. That way you'll get blooms, whether it's in the spring or the fall. So try and get those done before the 4th of July. Obviously, we've passed that date, so don't prune your fall blooming camellias. You can always do a little bit of tipping here and there. So you can always do a little bit of kind of trimming to shape. Something's kind of gone a little wild, that's fine. But to do a big prune, like to really shape the whole plant, if you've got kind of a wild plant and you want to take it back into a box or a round shape, wait until next year. Do it after it's bloom in the spring, and you'll be perfectly fine. Okay, I'm going to move into house plants real quick, into our indoor plants. There's lots of great options here. I'll go through these pretty quick because I know I'm already past an hour and I don't want to hold y'all up too much longer. But these are bromeliads. Bromeliads are a great option for fall blooms. Bromeliads are super, super easy to take care of. This is a really pretty one that I grabbed. I think it's Vogue, so Bromeliad Vogue, Verisa Vogue. And it's really pretty because it's got this kind of burgundy color with these yellow tips. So it's got that great fall color. These can actually grow in a lot of different conditions, really from pretty low light to medium to high light. So really easy, versatile plant. Don't require a lot of water. Wet, dry cycle. Super, super easy, but great fall color. Anthuriums are a really popular one. Now I grabbed this red one, but they come in pinks and lots of different colors now, maroons. There's some maroon ones out there that are absolutely gorgeous. But anthuriums are one of the easiest plants to take care of. For a low light blooming plant, this is a great option. So if you don't have a whole lot of light, but you're looking for some blooms, then this is a great option. A little bit more medium light would actually give you a little bit more blooms, but this is a great option. They're very easy to take care of. Wet, dry cycle, don't take a lot of care, and this great bloom looks great. It's a great Valentine's gift, but if you're looking for some red color as we get kind of into that fall, Christmas season, this is a great option for you. It's a gorgeous plant. The waxy kind of heart-shaped leaves are really pretty, and then this is the spathe, which is the bloom on this, and this is actually a leaf. So this actually is not the actual bloom, but it comes out in this red color, and that's the bloom right there, the spathe. So really, really pretty. Anthuriums are gorgeous, easy to grow house plants, indoor plants. You can take them outside for a summer vacation if you want to, but bring them back in pretty much around the end of October, and then you're good to go. Of course, Florist Moms. So I talked about this in my webinar all about mums. There's the two different types typically. So your garden mums that I talked about earlier, this big, huge, round thing of color. And then you've got your florist mums. A lot of the florist mums actually are going to be hardy enough to grow outside. Typically might not look the exact same. A lot of these are grown with different types of light conditions in a greenhouse, but sometimes you can plant them and they'll come back. I always say go for it if you want to, but if you want to grow them inside, they're very, very easy, great splash of color. And we really do carry these pretty much all the way up until about Thanksgiving time frame. So if you're looking for a splash of fall color on your indoor decor, this is a great option. They come in lots of different colors. Yellows, I love this one with that maroon with that yellow center. You'll see some of the Pele mums. The Pele mums are absolutely gorgeous with the orange and yellow striping in the blooms. Absolutely stunning, and there's a lot of different colors. So, and they're really inexpensive, which is why I love them. $5.99 for this great little 4-inch plot. You can pop this into a little pot very easily, put it on your buffet display for your Thanksgiving dinner or down the center of your table for a tablescape. Really, really great option. These florist mums. So if you ever see our signs, you're going to see garden mums and you're going to see florist mums. And that's the difference. One is grown for more of an inside condition. The other one is grown for more of your garden, your perennial. Now, I brought this in here because it's blooming and it's a house plant. This is a gardenia. And gardenias, you think of outside. There are a couple varieties of gardenias that bloom in the spring, like late spring, like Chuck Hayes is one of my favorites. There's also the Autumn Joy, I think is the name. Now it's kind of escaping me. But there's a couple gardenias that actually grow in the landscape that bloom in the late spring and then again in the fall. And I brought this in, one, to talk about the shrub, but also to talk about our indoor flowering department that is constantly changing. We are constantly getting in different plants into our indoor plant department. So if you're looking for an indoor plant that's blooming, we're constantly getting different ones. So I brought this in really specifically to say, if you are looking for a certain kind of blooming plant, you need to check us out a little bit more frequently. Come in every week or two and check out what we got in because we've got some different blooming plants all the time. This is absolutely amazingly fragrant. That pure white bloom, you cannot beat it with that waxy green leaf. So if you're having a party and you want to spruce up a space, you want to create a tablescape, you need a little bit of plant, and you want something that's blooming, check us out every once in a while, because we've got a great selection, and that goes all the way through the holiday season. Of course, there's poinsettias that we're going to get during the Christmas time frame, but we'll get a lot of different things too. So I always bring this, I just wanted to bring this in to say, check us out, because we always have different things coming in. And then, of course, another great fall plant, really that we carry almost all season these days because they're so easy to grow, is Kalanchoe or Kalanchoe. So Kalanchoe or Kalanchoe, really easy way to say this. Kalandiva is another option there. So it goes by a lot of different names. This is looking a little bright orange to me on the camera, but it's really a deep orange, absolutely stunning. Really easy plant to grow. It's almost in the succulent class, so it's got the kind of that moisture in the leaves, really easy to grow. Wet dry cycle, does like a little bit of a brighter light, so we want it to medium to bright light, somewhere in that area. But these are super easy. They bloom for a long period of time, somewhere I think around that 3 to 4 week, 5 week time frame. And you can keep on getting blooms. Once the bloom kind of fizzles, just cut it off and you'll get a couple more sporadically through there. But really easy to grow, gorgeous plant just by itself. You can see the leaves are just stunning, that kind of waxy leaf, but really easy to grow. And these come in a huge array of colors as well, yellows, pinks, reds, oranges, and we pretty much carry these year round. And again, another one of those really relatively inexpensive plants. $12.99 for this huge thing. I mean, this is probably a little bit better, I think, than the mum. I mean, if you're looking for something different, if you're kind of like, I've done mums every year for the last couple of years, this looks just absolutely stunning, looks really fresh, kind of has that modern take on it. So really nice option is Kalandiva, Kalanchoe, Kalanchoe. I know that's a lot of different names there, but you'll see them when you come into the garden center. They're absolutely stunning. And of course, orchids. Moth orchids are one of my favorites because they just continually bloom for such a long period of time. I'm talking could be up to 2 to 3 months. These are absolutely stunning. I grabbed this one because it's a waterfall. So you can see this stake, this kind of hoop stake here, and look at that bloom. They've basically taken this bloom, turned it down this stake, and so you get this awesome waterfall effect. And then all of a sudden we got this other little side shoot over here that's coming out. But these bloom for a really long time. They're actually very easy to grow. They don't require a ton of light. So an east-facing window, something that's going to get morning sun is perfectly fine. You don't need a ton of light for these. They can take a little bit higher light. That's fine. You don't want to put them directly in a window. Wet dry cycle, so water them really good. Usually they're grown in a moss or a bark for their growing media, so soak it really good. These grow in trees in the rainforest, so they're used to kind of attaching their roots into something, and then when that root or when that bark or moss structure absorbs the moisture, then it can drink from it. So we want to give it a good soaking every once in a while. Other than that, pretty easy to take care of. They do bloom on temperature, so if you want to take them outside for a summer vacation, bring them back in the fall, then you're going to get that kind of temperature fluctuation, and then it'll start to bloom again for you pretty easily. So they're really easy, and moth orchids are one of my favorite. Phalaenopsis moth orchid. Stunning plant. All right, and then let's see, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, I grabbed one more. We'll kind of wrap it up with a fun one. It's kind of different. We just got in a great selection of citrus. Now, a lot of it's not blooming right now, perfectly fine. It's pretty normal, but I did grab this one because it does have a couple buds on it. And so I wanted to bring this in because even the things that you don't suspect are blooming or are an option, then there are a lot of different ones out there. And so always kind of keep your eyes peeled for all those different things that are happening in nature. Your citrus plants, a lot of them will bloom sporadically, and sometimes you'll get blooms coming into the fall season, especially if you have your plant out for the summer outside and you're going to bring it back in the fall, it might be blooming. And so I brought this because the fragrance on a citrus bloom is absolutely amazing. Almost like a gardenia, just really great fragrance. If they are blooming indoors, I always like to bring up this tip. Take a little watercolor brush, a little paint brush, or even a Q-tip, and just touch each flower. That'll help spread the pollen from one flower to the next so you can get the fruit set, because typically inside we don't have the insects and the wind like we do outside. But just think about all the different options out there. Always check us out. We've always got lots and lots of different options for blooming plants. Of course, we've got tons of different plants all the time, so just kind of check us out. I think I saw a couple other questions here. Anthuriums are toxic to dogs and cats, so if they chew on the plants, don't buy them. They are beautiful though. So Darlene, great question, and there's a lot of plants that are toxic to dogs and cats. I can never remember all of them. It would be a lot to remember. And I always say I've got a little bit of a knowledge about a lot of different things. So I always recommend that people go to the ASPCA website. You can type in any plant name there if you're ever curious, and you can see if your dog and cat is something that if they like to nibble on plants, that would be something that maybe you could get or could not get. But thank you, Darlene. Great point. Jennifer said, my gardenia has yellow leaves on the bottom. They have started to shed. I just planted it this year in August. Is that normal? Jennifer, yes, completely normal. What you can do, and it's not too late to do it, is give it a little bit of plant food. So that green leaf plant food, Jennifer, that I mentioned a couple times in this webinar, it would be a great option because it's got iron in it. And gardenias use a ton of iron to produce those extremely fragrant blooms. So you definitely want to come in and get a little bit of iron. You can get a straight chelated liquid iron, chelated liquid iron, or you can get a granular iron, but our green leaf plant food is actually going to give it potassium, which is going to help it through the winter months, and it's going to help green it up. Now, typically what you're going to see is some of those leaves fall off and it usually rebounds. Basically, it said I put all this energy into producing that amazing bloom for you, and now I've got to shed some of my weight, I got to drop some of my leaves, and that's typically normal. But it's going to be something that you're going to have to keep up with. Gardenias do need that pretty regularly, and so a feeding schedule with our green leaf plant food would be the best option because you're always going to get some iron in there. That's what's so good about that plant food is it's got iron and magnesium and zinc and molybdenum and boron. So it's got a lot of different things in there. The trace elements are just as important sometimes as the macro, those big nutrients, those nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Darlene said, got to run for an appointment. We'll watch the recording later. This has been very informative. Thank you, Darlene. Have a great day. Pam, it would be great if you had a small section in the store labeled cat dog friendly. That's a great thought, Pam. Thank you for that. Definitely, I always have that ASPCA website up on my phone so that if people ask, we can always look it up very quickly. It's a great website, great information, and it gives you the different levels of toxicity too, which is so important. Sometimes it just causes nausea, sometimes it can cause death, and we want to know those differences if somebody's asking, especially if you've got your pet friend that loves to nibble on new plants or any plant. A lot of us have dogs and cats that don't mess with anything, but sometimes we do, and it's very, very important to know whether those plants are. But maybe that's a good idea, Pam, is to put a little bit of signage out that says pet friendly, or maybe doing a little section. So great option there, Pam. Great thought. We love all those comments. I love all the questions. Great questions today, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I went on and on about pansies for way too long, but they're absolutely one of my favorites. So come in this weekend, see us for Pansy Days. Plant your pansies. It's a great time. Check me out next week when I plant up a fall container. I'll be using pansies, ornamental grasses, everything that I can find. I'll do some simple ones, and I'll go all the way to do some crazy ones. So I hope to see you next week. We hope to see you in this weekend for our great Pansy Day deals. Come in and see us. And have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the cooler weather. Enjoy fall. Get excited. There's lots and lots of things to do. All right, everybody. I'll see y'all later.